We just discussed section 11. They have elephants, and the Romans are prepared to have an elephant battle if it comes down to an attack on Rome. And so, to recap, we have Severus, who is in Pannonia on his way through the Alps, and he's going to be coming straight to the heart of Rome to capture the empire for himself and displace Julianus. We have Emperor Niger in Antioch, who's been lazy, lounging around and feasting and having fun and kind of not even caring about coming to Rome. And so while he's dilly-dallying, we have Severus coming to the heart of Rome in, I would say, revenge against the murder of Pertinax, and he's planning to recapture the empire for himself. So, without further ado, section 12. But while Julianus's forces were still waiting and just making the preparations for battle, news came that Severus was already approaching. He had dispersed most of his army and ordered them to infiltrate the city. They distributed themselves out along all the routes, and many actually entered Rome undetected under cover of night by concealing their weapons and dressing up as civilians. The enemy were already in the city, while Julianus still failed to rouse himself, unaware of what was taking place. But when the news reached the people, they were all in a complete panic, and for fear of Severus's forces, they pretended to support him by condemning Julianus's cowardice and Niger's negligent delay. They were astonished when they heard Severus had already arrived. Julianus was completely stupefied and at loss to know how he should deal with the crisis. Ordering the Senate to convene, he sent them a letter in which he proposed concluding a treaty with Severus and making him a partner in the empire by publicly proclaiming him emperor. The Senate gave their vote to approve to this proposal, but as they viewed Julianus's cowardly state of despair, they all proceeded to go over to Severus's side. About 2 or 3 days later, when they heard that Severus would be at the very gates of Rome, they gathered together at the Senate house in contempt of Julianus and on the instructions of the consuls, who normally take over business when there is a crisis over the succession. After they had assembled, they began to deliberate on their course of action, while Julianus remained in the palace, bewailing his present state and begging to be allowed to abdicate from his rule and cede all his power to Severus. When the Senate learned of Julianus's total demoralization and that his bodyguard had deserted him because they were afraid of Severus, they voted that Julianus should be destroyed and Severus acknowledged as sole emperor. A delegation was sent to him, of which the spokesmen were the magistrates and the leading senators, to convey to Severus the full honors that accompanied the title of Augustus. One of the military tribunes was dispatched against Julianus to kill the cowardly, wretched old man who had purchased his sorry end with his own money. Julianus was found alone and deserted by everyone and was murdered amid a shameful scene of tears. When Severus received the news of the Senate's action and the death of Julianus, he was encouraged to set his aim still higher and used a stratagem to try to overpower and take prisoner those responsible for the murder of Pertinax. He sent secret messages in private to the military tribunes and centurions, offering them rich rewards if they would persuade the soldiers in Rome to accept his orders with obedience. To the garrison, however, he issued a public command that they should leave behind all their weapons in the camp and come out dressed for a peaceful procession a peaceful procession as they did when conducting the emperor to the sacrifice or the celebration of a festival. They were to swear their allegiance to him and should have every confidence that they would be enrolled as his guard. Believing this to be a genuine order and urged on by the tribunes, the soldiers abandoned all their arms and quickly marched out, clad only in their ceremonial uniforms and bearing wreaths of laurels. When they reached Severus's camp and announced their arrival at the parade ground, Severus ordered them to form up around him as though he was going to make them a speech of welcome. But as they closed in upon him cheering together, where he stood on the tribunal, they were all surrounded at a signal. Severus had already given instructions to his own forces to treat the guards as enemies by surrounding them as soon as they were all standing still with their eyes on him and their attention distracted. Their orders were not to wound or strike anyone, but to contain them and keep them under surveillance, ringed about with weapons, merely waving their lances and spears as threats, so that a few unarmed men would not fight many armed men for fear of getting wounded. When he had them caught within a ring of weapons like a net, Severus addressed them passionately in a loud voice. You now see a practical demonstration of the fact that we are your superiors in intelligence, in the strength of our forces, and in the number of our allies. You have been easily trapped and are our prisoners without even a struggle. I can do with you what I want, since you are now standing before me as victims in my power. If one tries to find a punishment for your effrontery, it is impossible to think of any penalty to impose that fits your crimes. You murdered a respectable and honorable old emperor when you ought to have been acting as a guard for his protection. Our ancestors won the Roman Empire, whose reputation is eternal, by deeds of outstanding bravery, and inherited it through a noble line of succession. But you sold it shamefully and dishonorably for a sum of money, as though it were some private possession. But then you could not have even defended and protected your chosen ruler, betraying him instead in a cowardly fashion. For these enormities and crimes you deserve to die 1,000 times if one were to determine a just punishment. You know how you deserve to be treated. Yet I shall spare you. I am not going to copy your actions by killing you. On the other hand, it is neither right nor just that you should act as the imperial guard any longer, once you have broken your oath and defiled your hands with the blood of fellow citizens and an emperor by betraying your trusted position as protectors. Your lives and limbs shall be spared. Take them as a gift of my generosity. But I order the soldiers who are surrounding you to strip you of your rank and whatever uniform you're wearing and dismiss you empty-handed. I further order you to go so far as possible from Rome, with the warning on my solemn oath that if any of you are found within 100 miles of Rome, you will be executed. After Severus had given this order, the Illyrian troops rushed forward and took away from the soldiers the daggers that they were carrying, which were inlaid with silver and gold for ceremonial use, and their belts, uniforms, or any other military insignia they were wearing. Then they were dismissed, completely stripped, being utterly powerless to do anything against the superior, or against any superior armed force when they were outnumbered and without their weapons. The guards submitted, betrayed by the trap into which they had fallen. And so they went away, lamenting their fate, although they were grateful for the guarantee of their safety. They resented the humiliation and ignominy of their capture through having come out without their weapons. There was another scheme also which Severus had devised. He was afraid that after they had been stripped of their office, the soldiers in desperation might make a rush to the camp to retrieve their weapons. So he sent ahead by alternative routes and shortcuts a contingent of men specially selected for their own bravery. The idea was that they should quietly occupy the camp while it was deserted, take control of the weapons, and shut out the guard if they made an attack. After the murders of Pertinax had been punished, and then we're going to go into section 14 and 15 and finish out book 2 of Herodian, and I will do that in the next stream. Thank you.